Okay, folks, if you'd be so kind to grab your seats, except for my panelists, I'd like my panel of experts to come up and take their seats, please. Okay, the paparazzi are here, so it must be time to get started. Thank you so very much, folks, for joining us today. My name is Julie Evans. I'm the CEO of an education nonprofit group called Project Tomorrow. And my job today is to share with you some of our very latest research findings, particularly around the conversation about education equity and the role of the use of technology in school and out of school to address some particular inequities, and we'll talk a lot more about that. As you can see, I have a fabulous panel of experts here with me. I will introduce them in just a moment. Let me first tell you that if you are interested in tweeting, if you're of the tweet persuasion here, our hashtag or our handle is SpeakUpEd, and there'll be some tweets that are going out on that, so you can follow along with that. We also are doing a live stream of this congressional briefing today, so welcome to all of our friends and family from around the country, around the world, that are joining us on the live stream. If you are looking for internet access while you are here, it is, the password is Senate Guest, and then the username is Cloakroom, all one word, lowercase. I have it backwards? It's the other way around. Okay, the other way around. If you don't try it one way, try it the other. There's Cloakroom and there's Senate Guest. Thank you very much. Okay, so our plan for today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the research that we do first, and then I'm going to share with you some highlights of that particular set of data that we are here to talk about today. And I'm going to do that in three parts. So I'm going to share a little bit of data, and then we're going to have a fabulous conversation with our panel of experts. Then I'm going to share a little bit more data, more conversation, a little bit more data, and then conversation. And then we're going to open it up to our audience here in Washington, D.C. for your questions or your comments. So we've left some time for that as well. At the end, I'm going to give you what I'm calling a call to action. They're actually some thought questions, some questions for you to take back to your offices, some questions for you possibly to discuss with colleagues, to take back to your schools or districts, some thought-provoking questions having to do with education equity. Okay, without much more housekeeping to do, let me share with you our fabulous panel of experts that we have assembled here who are going to be providing commentary on some of the data that we're sharing today. So I'm going to start all the way down at the end, down there, with my new friend, Jamie, who is a 10th grader. What school are you at, Jamie? You have to push the little button on the...
Millbrook High School, Winchester.
Okay, thank you. Very nice to have you here, Jamie.
Thank you.
Next to Jamie is Paulina. Hi, Paulina. Paulina is in 7th grade. Paulina, tell us the name of your school.
I go to Hampton Middle School.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next to Paulina is Madison. You know the drill, Madison. Tell us the name of your school. Madison's in 5th grade.
Swans Creek Elementary School.
Okay, thank you. And then next to Madison is Messiah. Messiah, tell us the name of your school.
Swans Creek Elementary School.
Swans Creek Elementary School. Messiah is in 3rd grade. Okay, this is our student expert panel. Welcome them, please. And this is not going to be a debate. I just want to make sure you understand this. But on this side are our educators. So starting way down at the end is my good friend, Paul Caputo, who is the superintendent in Southern Columbia Area School District in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Paul. Next to Paul is Jim Becker, who is the high school principal in the same district, Southern Columbia Area School District in Pennsylvania. Nice to have you here, Jim. Margaret Barnes, wave to the crowd. Fairfax County here in Virginia. Welcome, Margaret. And then next to Margaret is Jackie Zakaris, who is an ELL, ESL teacher from Frederick County in Virginia. Welcome, panelists. So we will hear a lot more from our panel. I am quite aware after doing these briefings now for 15 years that I am just merely the sideshow here. It's really about the panelists. I do want to thank Senator Manchin from West Virginia, who helped us procure this room for today. That was wonderful. And also want to give a shout out to our fabulous sponsors who make it possible for us to do the Speak Up survey every year. They are all wonderful. I also want to give a big shout out and applause to all of the education partners that work so closely with us, not only in terms of understanding the data, but crafting the questions and then promoting the survey and the research out to their members and to their affiliates. They are truly wonderful partners, and it's fabulous to have the opportunity to work with all of them. Now, let me tell you just a little bit more about Project Tomorrow so you understand where we're coming from. We are an education nonprofit group. We have been focused in on K-12 education since 1996. We have a particular focus on the learning experiences that students are having both in school and out of school. And our particular deep dive right now is on the effective use of STEAM resources, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematic resources on those learning experiences that students are having. We're best well known for the Speak Up Research Project for Digital Learning, and that is the basis of the research that I'm going to be sharing with you today. Speak Up is an unusual project in that we make it available to any K-12 school or district that would like to participate in the research with us. What we do is design a series of online surveys to collect feedback from students, from teachers, from principals, from district administrators, technology leaders, librarians, and media specialists, parents, and community members, to share with us their perspective, not only on what's happening in their schools, what's happening in their learning lives, but particularly about the role of technology in those learning lives. Speak Up is also unusual because it is both a service for K-12 schools and districts as well as a national research project. So we're always thrilled to be here in Washington, D.C. and share the results of the research with all of you. But in addition to that, we also provide to every participating school or district their own locally collected data with state and national data to use as a comparative. We have been doing this since 2003 and make this service 100% free for schools and districts. Our real goal here is to help school and district leaders build up their capacity for listening to their stakeholders, particularly listening to the ideas of their students and incorporating those into their plans. The types of questions on the Speak Up survey are about learning and teaching with technology primarily, though we ask different questions of different audiences. We ask teachers about their professional development needs. We ask superintendents, it's one of my favorite questions, Paul. We ask our district administrators, what wakes you up in the middle of the night as a sign of priorities. We ask parents about what they're concerned about with their child's future and the use of technology, and also where they see the benefits in terms of their students' use of technology. We ask all the respondents to talk to us about a wide range of different types of new technology or classroom models that are happening in their school or district. So we ask around the ideas of what are you doing with technology, but also what do you value, how do you feel about it, and then also what are your hopes and dreams. So what are your aspirations for improving the school day, improving the learning for our students? Since we started this in 2003, we've had a little bit over 5.4 million surveys that have been submitted through Speak Up, making Speak Up the largest collection of authentic feedback from students in particular about the use of technology within the learning experience. The data that I'm going to be sharing with you today was collected last fall. The surveys were open from the middle of October to the end of January. As you can see, we had a little bit over 400,000 surveys that were submitted last year, coming from around 10,000 schools all across the country in all 50 states, plus right here in the District of Columbia. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of the student research findings that we have, some data from teachers, some data from parents, and also some data from administrators. Our particular focus in reporting out the data this year is a little bit different than we've done in the past. In the past, we've done a great big research report that included all of the data from all of the different stakeholders. This year, we decided to do a series of briefing papers. So we're actually doing 5 smaller briefing papers around key topics that we know are highly impactful or meaningful for schools and districts, as well as for policymakers. So those 5 different areas are equity, which we're going to be talking about today. Then we're doing a special briefing paper on personalization, college and career skill development, effective teachers, and then parent communications, that home to communications link. So we're releasing the first briefing paper here today. You're all here in the room, so you got a hard copy of that. Our folks on our live stream can collect that from our website, of course. And then the next couple of weeks, you'll see more of our briefing papers coming out. So I'd like to start off by giving you just some really high-level research trends that we've been watching over the years. They may be the same type of things that you're paying attention to or you're thinking about or even that you're reading about. But what we wanted to do is kind of put our spin on it. So there's a couple different things that we think are really important coming out of our research findings. One is that there's obviously a much stronger emphasis today than ever before on making sure that our students are well prepared for the future, whether that is college, the military, going directly into a career, going for some job training, whatever it might be. And in particular, the role of technology in helping students develop those type of college and career-ready skills. We also are finding that there's much greater acceptance as well as interest in all these different types of new classroom models. So the classroom of yesterday is definitely in the past, and we're in the process of reinventing all sorts of new classrooms for the future. And many of our panelists here will have an opportunity to talk about that. We're also really excited about this other trend, and I'm sure many of you that are here from school districts have already seen this. We actually have in our schools today a new type of parent. We're calling them the new digital parent. They are a younger parent who's grown up not only using technology in their work life, but for many of them, they grew up using it in a learning environment. And that means that they have very different expectations in terms of how they want their children to learn, and also in terms of communications with their child's teacher and with the school district. We really think that's fascinating. Now, of course, one of the other things that we're paying a lot of attention to, and we're going to be talking about it today as well, is that increased criticality around internet connectivity, both in school to make sure it's at the level where we can do all of these exciting things using technology, and also at home. And we're going to take our last part of data that we're going to be sharing today is going to be about that internet access in the home. Now, all of these trends are really interesting, and on one level we could say, well, of course, it's technology, it's engaging, it's compelling, it's interesting to talk about. But really what we're finding is that a lot of these conversations around technology, it's really just a metaphor for the changes that are happening in education. And if we can take a look and do a deep dive into understanding that process of adoption using these different tools, what people are interested in, it gives us a new glimpse into what the future can be in terms of new learning experiences. But in the same regard, we also find, and if you take a look at this image here, you might have an idea, we also find that people see things through different lenses. So some of us may look at this, I'm sorry panelists, you can't see it. Some of us may look at this particular image and see a face. It's got a really high forehead, a strong nose, deep set eyes. Some folks may see an image of a woman in a long skirt. Maybe it's like, it looks like maybe she's wearing a fur coat. Maybe there's even leaves on the ground. Some of us in this room probably see both images. My gut feel is there may be some of us that don't see either image. When we talk about the use of technology in schools today, it's a little bit like this image. We're looking at it through different lenses. Some of us had to learn how to use technology in our work life, so we have a very particular lens in terms of the adoption of technology tools. Others have grown up using this technology, and thus they come to this conversation with a different set of perceptions and expectations. So it makes it complicated when we're thinking about the future. How do we reconcile all of these different points of view together and come forward with a shared vision as to what the future of learning can look like. That's where we believe that the Speak Up Research Project provides a very valuable service to help bring all these different points of view together in a set of data that is actionable, that you can actually use. Now, I said today we're going to be talking about what we're calling the educational equity imperative, leveraging technology to empower learning for all. And I want to give you just 3 key points why we think this conversation is not only important, but important to have today. 3 key points. There's more that we can make. We're just going to focus in on 3 today. The first one is that we have seen in all of our years of research that technology can definitely help students develop the types of workplace, college, and career-ready skills that we're talking about. It provides a different type of learning experience and facilitates the opportunity for students to develop some of these skills. I'm going to give you some data on that today. We also know that our schools and districts all across the country have made huge investments in technology infrastructure, in mobile devices for their students, in all types of digital content. But we're also hearing, folks, that sometimes there isn't an equitable distribution of those resources across the district, school to school, or even within a school. We're going to talk about that today as well. And then the final point I mentioned before is about the criticality of this internet connectivity, particularly outside of school. As more and more technology is being used in the school day and we're implementing different types of learning experiences that are digitally rich, we're finding that there is either an explicit or implicit demand for students to be able to go online and use these technology tools outside of school. Yet we know that in some communities, in some families, that isn't necessarily always an opportunity for those students. So we're going to talk about equity from that perspective as well. Okay, so I sort of tipped my hand here. The 3 areas we're going to look at is the role of technology in helping to develop workplace skills, the equity of technology from a distribution standpoint in schools, and then the challenges associated with out-of-school access. We'll start with the first one. I'm going to share a little bit of the research data around the workplace skills conversation, and then we're going to get into our panel discussion. Okay, so this first one is about the role of technology in developing workplace skills. So we find that when we ask parents as well as education leaders, administrators, what are the most important skills for students to acquire so that they are ready for the workplace, ready for college, ready for careers, whatever it might be. This is the list that parents and educators agree upon, and it's very, I think, impactful that they do agree on the line items. Critical thinking and problem solving, the ability to work with diverse groups of people, collaboration and teamwork skills, capacity to learn independently. Technology skills is on that list as well, and you can see the other ones. We also know that when we ask parents, in particular, what are your concerns about your child's future? What parents have told us across the country, universally, is their number one concern is my child is not learning the right skills in school to be successful in the future. When we look at that data, folks, and disaggregate that by whether that parent and that family lives in an urban area, a suburban area, or a rural area, there is little or no differentiation in that data. When we look at Title I schools as an indicator of high poverty communities, there is no differentiation in that data. In fact, a couple years ago, we did the Speak Up survey in Mexico, and we had the same question for parents from Mexico, and they had the same answer. There is a universal concern and understanding that our students need a different set of skills to be successful in the future, and thus there is that concern about the linkage between that skill development and what's happening in the school day. Now, parents tell us a couple other interesting things that you might find important for this conversation today. They also tell us that the best way for their child to develop these types of workplace skills is to use technology regularly during the school day. So parents make that connection between the use of technology and the development of workplace skills. They also tell us that they believe it is very important for their child to have access to technology during the school day. 83% of parents told us that. But the other thing that we heard from parents is that their other concern about technology specifically in the school day is that it varies too much from teacher to teacher, from class to class, from subject to subject. So what that means is that the child is coming home and saying, I went to fourth period today where we did amazing things using technology in my science class, and then for fifth period, I was in English, and I was told to put my Chromebook away and not take it out. So we see that sort of variation. Parents are keenly aware of that, and as you can see, increasingly are focused in on that, not just as a point of, I want my child to use technology, but it's actually part of this equity conversation. Why is it that in some classes we're developing those skills and in some classes we're not? So what we did to help you today better understand this conversation is that we took a look at our teacher data, specifically looked at data from teachers that told us they were using digital animations and simulations, that they were using online videos in their class, or they were using online curriculum in their class. We chose those three as representative of a range of different things that teachers could potentially be using technology for. Now, we also saw that principals are making that connection as well. In this case, they're making a connection between the use of digital content and the opportunity to address some equity issues. So in this regard, we find that teachers are telling us that the use of those tools, digital content, is helping their students develop these type of workplace skills, most notably the opportunity for collaborations, creativity, and critical thinking and problem solving. And no surprise here to any of us that have worked with students for a long time, the students are telling us the same thing. They see that the use of digital content or mobile devices is helping them develop these type of skills. What was fascinating to us is that when we looked at students who did not have internet access at home, they are even more interested in using that type of technology in school, so they're placing a greater importance on that than even their peers that don't have that same challenge. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the workplace skills associated with the use of technology. Now we want to hear from our experts. So I have a series of questions that I'm going to get started with here to ask our experts about their perspective on this particular topic, and then I'll share a little bit more data and we'll go back and forth. Okay, so I'm going to start off here on the administrator and teacher side of things. I mentioned what the data looks like in terms of the development of workplace skills and the importance that parents are placing on those sort of workplace skills. Can you tell us a little bit about what you might be doing in your schools or in your district to help students develop these type of skills? Anyone that would like to start?
First of all, Julie, I want to thank you for making the Speak Up digital project available to schools. We've been using it since 2006, and it's been very important to us because it's a free service. Mm-hmm. And it's helped us make curriculum decisions, grant writing, comprehensive planning. It's been invaluable, so we really want to thank you for that opportunity. As far as career development, I think technology itself kind of kick-started some of the places where we are right now, because we do believe teamwork and collaboration. Those are two big pluses that we're seeing from the use of digital tools in terms of career development. Those are some of the skills I know even our parents, based on the feedback that we're getting from the Speak Up survey, that those are being able to use technology effectively, and then of course the teamwork and collaboration skills which you can get from the projects that are designed around digital tools.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Any other perspectives here?
Our school district is in a very rural area, and I think since the inception of technology, I was one of those people that you talked about who became a teacher, and then technology exploded, so I had to get on board, and it was a great window opening opportunities for me. We live in a rural area, and I really think the use of technology, and we continue, just gives our kids open windows to their future and opportunities that they may not have seen otherwise, especially with career exploration. We work very hard in trying to have opportunities for kids across the curricular areas, whether, and in high school, whether it's business education, technology education, and even in our core classes, math and science, technology just brings a whole new learning experiences for the kids that they feel more comfortable with than some of our older teachers. But I think what our teachers are seeing, the students being comfortable with it, teachers get comfortable, we use it more and more every day.
That's great, Jim. Thank you. Go ahead, Margaret.
Thank you. I wanted to just add that our students we want our students to use technology in the same way that we're using in the workplace ourselves. So we ask our teachers to work collaboratively in teams to develop assessments, to look at data, to create unique lesson plans together. And sometimes that means that they're working off-site, and because they're working in a collaborative digital environment, they can work at their own pace, at their own and the time that's most convenient for them, or they can work together in one room and delegate and divide up tasks. So we ask our students to do the same thing in working on projects. I'm going to steal something that my tech coach just said to me this morning, that we're no longer in the information age, we're in the conceptual age. So it's not just about having tech for our kids to get information, because that's available at our fingertips now, but they also have to be able to work together to respond to a need that maybe we haven't seen before, and work collaboratively and be creative about how we address that need.
I love that. Would we call that the conceptual age?
I give all credit to Tori Diggs. I cannot take any credit at all.
Okay, well, everyone is going to footnote
Yes.
Mr. Diggs. Thank you.
I would like to piggyback off of the fact that we're using it as, conceptually in technology in our classrooms. I previously taught third grade, and our classroom was able to Skype through Google Hangouts with classes around the world, and to be able to see what happens in another classroom, that, we're not just living inside of our own school. There are classes all over, and now teaching English to speakers of other languages, we're still able to do that. And my students are able to practice their English skills with people they wouldn't normally speak with, and in a comforting way, because they're in the classroom with us.
Yeah, because they would not have been able to do that previously when teachers were teaching English to non-English speakers. It was much more just what was happening in the classroom.
Right. Now they're able to see other students. They're just like them. They're learning English as well, or they're learning
Really
another
interesting.
language, and how their language acquisition process is working.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay, let's turn over here. They have been so patient waiting for me to get to them. Okay, so here's where we're going to start, students. Lots of people tell me all the time, particularly students, about how much they like using technology as part of their learning day, using technology of some kind in the school, whether that's computers or tablets or watching videos or playing online games for school, whatever that might be. Can some of you give us some perspective in terms of what you like about using technology for learning? Who would like to start? Go ahead, Paulina.
In school, we can use technology for, learning, obviously, but our teachers sometimes don't explain everything, in the way that helps you understand stuff. And, if you need help, that's what the technology is there for. It can explain things for you in a different way that your teacher can't.
So lots of folks tell us, or have told me, Paulina, and maybe the rest of you too, that sometimes they like watching videos to learn how to do things. Has anybody ever done that before? Have you ever watched a video to learn how to do something? Go ahead, Paulina.
In my math class, our teacher gives us a video for the night to watch, and then he gives us a worksheet to complete, and he records the videos in the night. He gives it to us the next morning, and we fill out the sheet, and the next day he gives us a worksheet about that sheet, and if we have any questions, we can ask him.
Okay, all right, that's a good representation. How about some other ways that folks are using technology in school?
Technology can help you to understand more about everything in the world, or we can investigate about whatever we want.
Do you have some examples, Jamie, of something that you've explored or done research on?
Yeah, Anne came about 2 years here about Salvador, so technology helped me a lot to speak English.
Okay, great. Your English is beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share? Okay, no. All right, so my next question is, now we've been talking about doing different types of things with technology, maybe collaborating or doing some group projects or something like that. Has anybody ever used technology to do something with some other students? Okay, thank you, Madison.
Well, I'm in the gifted program, and so whenever I'm there, we use Padlet, and so we can communicate with others and see their opinions, and then we can see their perspective, and then we can translate back to them and talk.
And did you say that was Padlet that you're using? Do you like using Padlet?
Yeah.
So some folks here in the audience probably are not familiar with Padlet, but it's an opportunity for students to answer questions that the teacher poses, and then they can see other students' answers as well. So do you like that opportunity to do learning with other students?
Yes.
Do you think it makes you a better learner? Okay, all right. Anybody have another example? Okay, go ahead, Paulina.
Sometimes when we're doing a group project and we have to work it out at home, we can email each other or go on our class notebook and we can just talk to each other as we type and work.
And why is that effective for you?
Because sometimes you can't finish everything at school and you need to go home and look up something or read a book, and then you can just tell your classmates without waiting till the next day.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you, panelists. Now I'm going to share a little bit more data, and then we'll come back and I have some additional questions for you. Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about is around this idea of the equity of technology use in school. So let me get into a little bit of this. Once again, I probably should have mentioned this up front. You do have the briefing paper as part of your packet, and there's a lot more detail and a lot more data that's there, as well as for our virtual audience, you can get that online. But I'm going to give you a couple little tidbits here to sort of stimulate our conversation. So one of the things that we've been asking school district leaders over the last couple of years is what do you think are the best strategies for improving student outcomes, particularly in terms of making sure that students are well prepared for success in the future? The top 3 that district administrators told us last year is enhancing teacher effectiveness, so making teachers more effective in the classroom, integrating college and career-ready skill development within the curriculum, what we just talked about, and leveraging technology to be able to make all of that work. So we think that that's really an interesting sort of mix coming from district administrators. However, the administrators also tell us that the equity issues of learning experiences, making sure that students have access to technology, continues to be a major challenge for them. And in fact, even more so as we would imagine in Title I schools. So 47% of principals told us that this issue of having enough technology to be able to have every student have that sort of opportunity is still a continuing challenge. In particular, they told us that those challenges were not just about the access to technology, but also in terms of internet capacity and bandwidth, and then also making sure that our teachers have the right level of support. Do they have the professional development do they need? Do they have technology support? Do they have the motivation to use the technology effectively is also an ongoing challenge for our principals. We also have found that when we looked at how schools and districts are implementing different programs, it's also very interesting to us. And so we took a look at where the schools and districts reported on the types of technology that they're using. And we were particularly interested in 2 different things. One, is there a difference between Title I schools versus non-Title I schools in terms of their access to technology? But also, have these programs grown over time, or are they staying pretty flat? So in particular, we looked at one-to-one programs. That's where a school assigns a type of mobile device. It might be a tablet, it might be a laptop, it might be a Chromebook, to an individual student. So it's not that the students have a cart of devices and they just use them for one period or one activity. They're actually assigned a device, they get to use it in school. It's their personal device for learning. In 2015, a little bit more than a quarter of principals nationwide told us they had implemented that type of program. Last fall, 60% of principals told us that there was some type of a one-to-one program in their school. And so we thought that was a pretty tremendous increase in just 2 years. The other thing that what we see from this data is that we do see it is somewhat uneven between Title I schools versus non-Title I schools, which of course then raises that specter of the inequities inherent in that. Excuse me. So in looking at the impacts of mobile devices, in particular, these one-to-one programs, we also saw that principals in particular were definitely making a connection between those type of programs and addressing their equity issues. So where they were able to find the resources or their district provided them with the resources to implement one-to-one programs, they felt that that was having an opportunity to address that type of equity since they were leveling the playing field in terms of student access to technology. That does not necessarily address how effectively those tools are being used, but it does start as a starting place, let's say, in terms of that. I'm going to take a sip of water, folks. Hold on. So we thought that was really interesting. We thought that this implementation of these one-to-one programs was an interesting case study to look a little bit deeper into. And so we took a look at high school students that were assigned a Chromebook or a laptop, excuse me, and wanted to know, was their learning experience different because they had the Chromebook or laptop? Now, we would assume it would be. I think for a lot of school districts that have made those investments, they would hope it would be. But we wanted to actually take a look at that. So we did a comparison between high school students that have a Chromebook or laptop and high school students that do not. And we definitely saw that the students, I'm sorry, folks, the students that have the Chromebook or laptop were not only personalizing their learning, they were organizing their learning to a greater degree, but it was also changing the way that they were implementing different types of learning experiences. So that they were taking notes in class. They were also emailing with their teacher and having that opportunity to have that sort of impact. I'm getting more water coming this way. Thank you, Messiah. We had a whole little chain gang here going, moving the water along. Thank you much. Thanks, Rod. So we thought that was a really interesting finding and also gets to that conversation about not just how we're implementing these technologies in school or are we checking the box saying that we have this type of technology, but actually how it's being used by the students. And then finally, we took a look at, from a principal perspective, so if you've implemented a one-to-one program, a laptop, Chromebook, tablet program in your school, are you seeing higher levels of effectiveness in certain subject areas more than others? So we're going to get into this with our principals in a moment. But we thought it was particularly interesting that in many areas there was a pretty big divide, most notably math. So principals that had implemented a one-to-one program in their school, at a higher percentage of them said that math instruction was more effective because of that than other principals that hadn't gone to that level. Okay, now that I've stopped coughing, we can get into the question and answer and have some other people answering questions. So let me start. I'm going to start this time. I'm going to start over here with our students, okay? So let me know, students, if you would like to share, do any of you have the opportunity to use a tablet or a Chromebook or a laptop during the school day? You do, Messiah? What do you have? Tell us.
I have a tablet, and I use Minecraft to build stuff so then I could be a builder when I grow up.
That sounds fabulous. So you're learning about your future career using the tablet. That's great. Do you like doing that, Messiah? Okay, good. Anybody else use a tablet or a Chromebook or a laptop in school? Jamie?
We use Chromebook all the time, and we can give it to the house and do homework there.
Oh, so you get to take your Chromebook
Yes.
home. Okay. That's a whole differentiation. We were able to see through our data the percentage of schools that are making the kids or having the kids keep the devices in school, and a small percentage, about a quarter of school districts across the country, are experimenting with the idea of their Chromebooks going home. That's a wonderful opportunity for you. Anybody else have an opportunity to use a device like that in school? Okay. How about in terms of, now Messiah started off, he already started talking about Minecraft. What other types of tools are you using? Go ahead, Morgan. Madison, I'm sorry.
We use PowerPoint all the
Okay.
time to do a presentation to our class. When I was in Signet, we did a phone addiction project. It was about how dangerous it could be when you're always on your phone. And so I was in Signet working on the PowerPoint for my project. And so my teacher told me to present it to my actual class. And so that's a big part because I presented it to everyone. And yeah.
So that's really exciting, Madison, because that's one of these skills that we're talking about that students need to have, the opportunity to present information. Did you like doing that?
Yes.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else have anything? What types of digital content or playing any other games? Messiah, what else?
On the computers, we use ABC Yaw to learn about other stuff we never learned before.
Okay. And do you think you're learning more when you get to use things like that? Okay, that's great. Go ahead, Paulina.
Sometimes when we're finished with our work, we can go on a website like Cool Math Games where you can like play different math games, but it's like you're not actually learning math. You're learning math, it just doesn't feel like you're learning math. It feels like you're playing.
And is that a good way to learn?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any idea why you think that's a good way to learn?
Because kids like playing but they don't like learning, so.
It sounds a little sneaky. All right, thank you, students. Let's see, again, we're not going to make this a debate, but we'll turn over to this side now. Panelists, do you find that in your schools, and in either talk about your own school or other schools that you know of, do you think that technology is used more effectively in certain subject areas than other subject areas, or is it pretty much all the same? Jim?
I feel it depends on the person, the teacher. I think it's very important to get professional development for those teachers that might not feel comfortable using the technology. I know in our schools, and we're very fortunate to be one of those one-to-one schools, the kids have the computers 24/7, and the connectivity that the kids have is pretty strong. So, I think that there's so many opportunities across the subject levels, whether it be one of the core courses or not. But again, I think there's so many opportunities. So I see it across, our math classes are using it, or science, and like I said, they're doing animation dissections, and so it's just, you can see a lot more, you do a lot more with it. I think it depends on the person, and it's very important to help the person who's maybe not using it as diligently as you would like. Give them professional development, make them feel comfortable in using it.
Other perspectives? Go ahead, Paul.
I agree with Jim. In some cases, though, there are certain things that are mandated, if you want to use that term, where, of course, online grade portals and online lesson plans. And if a teacher isn't comfortable, we do try to get support. But we're not, again, it's just going to be one of those things where we're not going to demand it, because just like the use of tools, I think everything needs to be used in balance. So to have a student's experience to be exposed to different types of teaching isn't a bad thing. At least that's our perspective as well. But overall, I think our teachers and our principals do a great job leveraging technology in the classrooms.
Great. Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, I think that I agree that it depends very much on the teacher, but I also think that's been the beauty of our collaborative teams, because our teachers have an opportunity to learn from each other. So on one team, we might have a teacher who's using the technology every day in their classroom, and they can observe each other and get into other classrooms to see what's being done. We're only one-to-one in with our 8th graders this year. This is the first year we're doing it, but we had an opportunity to visit schools before that, and one of the things that one of the schools mentioned was just to try one new thing, because everybody kind of needs their own pace, to develop, and some people just kind of take it and run, but others might just kind of need that safety to kind of make mistakes and take some risks, but just have to give them that flexibility to do that.
Yeah, we've been, in addition to this research, we also do efficacy evaluation studies around different types of technology, and we've actually been evaluating the adoption process by teachers of digital content and mobile devices in their classroom for many, many years. And you're absolutely right. There is no one recipe, one formula that you say, okay, well, if it's Tuesday, the first Tuesday in October, you should be here, and by January, you should be doing these things, and by May, we expect to see this. Everybody's path is different, and so supporting people on the path is really important. I really like that peer learning component of that. What about this conversation, folks, about this equitable distribution of resources? We're hearing this as obviously part of this equity conversation. And we're finding that either reported by parents or reported by teachers or administrators, that particularly within a district, there can be a lack of equity of resources. One school seems to have everything. Another school maybe is struggling. Or even within a school itself, there can be a differing level of those resources. Is that something that any of you have come across, or do you have an understanding of why that might be an issue? Yeah. Jackie?
In our high school, we are one-to-one with Chromebooks for all grade levels, but the disadvantage that we have for some of our students living in more areas that don't have technology access, or their parents don't have cable or internet, the students go home and it's cut off. That's it. They can't use it anymore. They have to wait till they come back to school. So we have we put forth an ESL after-school program. So every Wednesday after school, we had a vision that students were going to come, and we would take them on field trips and kind of take them around the community and show them different areas of our community and get them involved. But it turned into an extra hour after school every day for students to be able to submit their projects through Google Classroom, or anything they were working on with their peers if they had to work on it, because once they went home, they weren't able to use it anymore.
It just wasn't possible. Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful lead into our next section. So let's jump ahead to the next level here. We're going to be talking more about that out-of-school homework gap, is what some people are referring to it as. This is a really interesting picture here. Some of you may remember this. This was from an article in the New York Times a couple years ago. These are students standing outside their school, tapping into internet access. They don't have an after-school program, such as the one you described. And so they're standing there on the street, tapping into their school's internet to do their homework on their phones. And I gave the reference there, though you can find it. It was a New York Times article that described this. So we've been very interested in this conversation around students outside of school access, or lack of outside of school access, for a while. And so it's starting to bubble up a couple of years ago, where we were starting to see greater realization among school and district leaders that this was a challenge that needed to be met. And in fact, now we're seeing, as you can see here, particularly in rural districts, 50% of administrators in rural districts say that this out-of-school access challenge for their students is one of the key challenges that they're facing as a school and district. Most notably, if you take a look at that comparative there from 2007, which obviously feels like a long, long time ago, but only 1 in 10 principals were even thinking about that at that time. So definitely it goes hand in hand with the fact that we're using more technology in the school day, and there's this greater expectation, as Jackie explained to us, that the students would have access. So we've been looking for evidence of this homework gap through our data for quite a while. And so what I did for today is just pulled up some of our data from rural communities, specifically looking at rural communities. Found in the rural communities, particularly for middle school and high school students, is that many of them did say that they have access to a personal smartphone, some type of internet access, and that 21% of them say they're using a device where their school lets them take it home, but 13% of those students told us that they are regularly not able to do homework outside of school if there's a digital component or if there is an internet component. You know, a long time ago, for those of us that remember the phrase digital divide, when we talked about digital divide in the past, that was sort of a no. And that was all it was. And there was the kids that said yes, and there was the kids that said no. That conversation is a much different conversation because the questions are different today. So quite often what we will find is that students will tell us that yes, they do have internet access at home, but it's not necessarily internet access that we would want them to use to do homework, because maybe it's mom's smartphone, or maybe they have to go to Starbucks to do that, or go to McDonald's to get that access. So the vision of do we have safe access? Do we have convenient access? Is it appropriate access for students to do homework outside of school is a much different conversation than just do you have internet access at home or not. And so we also have found that when we ask these students that are impacted by the homework gap, the students that don't have safe, convenient, appropriate access outside of school, where they are going to do homework, you can see some of these statistics are pretty shocking. The ones that make sense to us is exactly the scenario that Jackie described to us. They're at school before bells or after bells to tap into that internet access. There are also, as you can see here, 26% told us that they are regularly going to a fast food restaurant or a coffee shop. I don't think any of us would say that's an appropriate place to necessarily do homework for our young students. 20% say they're doing it on a school bus or some type of public transportation. We're seeing that school buses are very interesting devices, very interesting places to put Wi-Fi today. And only about 18% say they're regular library, though we know that public libraries are in the business of providing that sort of access. It's not necessarily that students are going there. We also are finding when we look at these same students that there's some other things that are really interesting about them. Most notably that just because they don't have access at home doesn't mean that they don't value technology. In fact, they are more likely to value technology and want to have that access. Whether that is knowing that technology is an important skill for their future, or they would like to use more technology in the school day to supplement what they can't do outside of school as well. And so we think those are important findings. And then finally, we asked, for the last couple of years, we've been asking school and district leaders, so how are you addressing the homework gap? Now that you are aware of it, because we've documented that, what are you doing to address that? And here, for today, I shared with you what we're hearing from rural school districts. They are making their school buildings open earlier and keeping them open a little bit later for students to be able to come and do that. They're also, which I think is interesting, they're working with their public libraries to make sure that when their students come in after school, they get priority to be able to get online, to be able to do that. The next two are a little bit more discouraging to me, whether that's discouraging their teachers from assigning internet-based homework or telling their students to download things to a USB stick or a thumb drive so that they can have access outside of school. I don't think we definitely want to always support that. And then we're starting to see some other things that are kind of interesting, whether it's working with their local fast food restaurants to designate areas within the restaurant that are student homework areas. It sounds a little bizarre, but some folks tell us that they're doing that. And then, of course, some folks are talking about putting Wi-Fi on their buses to be able to do that as well. But the jury is still out in terms of how do we solve this problem. I know in my conversations around the country when I'm talking to school and district leaders, it is not a conversation that has easy solutions. And there is a high demand for it, there's an interest in it, there's an understanding that's important, but there's not necessarily a set of easy solutions. Okay, so let's go to our final set of my questions for our panel, and then we're going to open it up. We're going to open it up to all of you for your questions, so start thinking about your questions. So thinking about the communities and the communities that you serve, is there a homework gap in your communities for any of you to respond to? Jackie's already given us her example. Any of the rest of you? Go ahead, Margaret.
I mean, I do think that we are fortunate in Fairfax County to have quite a bit of access, but we do have some supports in place for those students who don't, and we did just have that conversation, now that we have one-to-one in one of our grade levels, yes, there is a lot of internet access through smartphones, but our school system provides hotspots for students, and but the broadband for the hotspots can be limited, so sometimes the speed, it could be frustrating for a student trying to work on the device. We do also let our students take the devices home, so that kind of standardizes what teachers know is available to students, so that if they're taking it home, they know that it's this particular device and they can access certain programs. We also advertise out to our families. There's a lot of, through Comcast and Verizon and some different companies, they'll have low-cost internet. So we advertise that out to our families as well. But it is a challenge, absolutely.
And in some places we're finding people knew the challenge was there, but it was only after they implemented a one-to-one program that they really started to see that challenge come up. Are the hotspots, that's a loaner program? Is that what you're doing? The other thing that's really interesting about this is that, based on some other research that we've done, is that when teachers know that their students have internet access at home, they actually are more likely to change their instructional practices to incorporate that. If there is even one student in a class that does not have access, teachers are then reluctant to assign digitally based or internet homework because they want to keep that playing field level as well. So that's also an interesting dynamic to think about. Paul?
Well, again, we know from the Speak Up surveys, 96% of our high school students have internet access at home and 98% of our middle school students. So that has encouraged us to give more digital type homework. We've tried all the things that you have mentioned and our panelists mentioned, with the exception of the school bus Wi-Fi. We experimented with the hotspots, but again, there were limitations. We were able to, again, being a rural district, there's pluses and minuses to that. The pluses, we know which students don't have the internet access, but again, being rural, we also have budget constraints that maybe a larger district might not have. So we were good with the $9.95 hotspot that we could buy X number and then allow students to sign them out. But the limitation is they had 1 gig capabilities for the month, and then that was it, and they were throttled. And for us to jump up to unlimited would be $30 a month. That was just out of our budget.
Yeah.
So we're always on the search, we're FCC Lifeline services and so forth. And just the other day, we were meeting with a vendor, and they were telling us about broadband over electricity. So we're hopeful that if that comes about, he was projecting a 2-year window that may solve our problem, again, depending upon the cost to hook on to such a service. But we do, maybe Jim can speak on the accommodations. I know we do know the students, and we do make accommodations.
Yeah, it's very important for our teachers to, and we're fortunate that our numbers are low, but it's important for our teachers to know who those kids are and give them every opportunity that we can, whether it's extra time in the morning, extra time after school. We are one of those schools, we keep our doors open. There's always some kind of activity going on after school they can have access to. We have some local communities, places that kids can get access to. Not a whole lot, again, but again, it's important for our teachers to know it. And there's times where they're not adapting the curriculum, but maybe adapting when they're collecting assignment or when things are done. So they said, I think we have to be understanding thankful for the capabilities we have, but understanding they are limited to a point. But I think our teachers do a nice job with that.
Yeah. One of the things, I know some of you have been to our briefings in the past, but a couple of years ago, interesting point you brought up, Jim. A couple of years ago, we had a teacher on the panel that said that she knew how to solve the whole homework gap situation. It was really fascinating. I know some of you are going to remember this when I tell you. What she had said to us was, and she was on the panel, was that she had modified what her due dates were for assignments. So in her particular community, what she had realized is that if she said to the students, okay, so I'm going to need you to go online and do this internet research and bring this assignment back in the morning, that put stress on kids that did not have access or didn't have an opportunity to go to the library or didn't have an opportunity to stay after school that day. However, if she made all of her due dates 3 days out, she had determined that within a 3-day window, the students could find some way to get online, whether they could stay early or stay late or go to a library or go someplace else. And that was a light bulb moment for me in terms of thinking creatively about how to really redefine the assignment due date process and change their practice. It's still not a perfect solution, but it is very interesting how all across the country we are finding that teachers and principals and district administrators are thinking creatively about this. Again, they don't have a perfect solution, but they're coming up with different types of things to do. So thank you for sharing that. Over here to my students. So we talked a little bit, Jamie, about the fact that you have the opportunity to bring your Chromebook home, and so you have the opportunity to get online using that Chromebook. Do the rest of you, when you're at home, do you have the opportunity to go online and do homework?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that no? Are you saying no, Messiah, or are you just shaking your head? No. Okay. Do you think that that's important for students to be able to go online and use technology to support homework when they're out of school?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think that there are some solutions that you can think of that would solve this problem for the kids that don't have access to technology outside school? Paulina?
I'm going to use my math teacher again. Some students who don't have internet access, he lets them stay after school in his classroom and finish up the homework assignment because he makes videos and puts them on YouTube for the students to watch. And if students don't have internet access, well, how are they going to do the homework? Sometimes he can't stay after school, but that's when he extends the due date. Yeah. He also gives, let's say he gives an assignment on the internet. He gives a paper copy to those who want it or those who don't have internet. Sometimes I prefer the paper copy because it's easier to focus on it than stare at a screen for hours.
Okay. And that's an interesting preference that we see. Certain students have a preference for screen versus print. We've actually been asking that for a while. Jamie, did you have a point? No? Okay. In terms of thinking about maybe either some students that you know that don't have access to the internet or to technology outside of school, do you think that's fair for them that they don't have that access? Do you think all students should have that access? Do you have a point, Messiah? Go ahead. No? Okay. You can think about it. Let me know if you want to. What do you think?
It's really bad for them because all we need internet.
Yeah? Okay. Does anybody have any ideas on how we could solve this problem? Do you have any suggestions here for all these adults in terms of what could solve this problem? Okay, well, maybe you guys can think about it. We'll maybe ask you afterwards if you have some ideas on that. Thank you. Okay, folks, what we're going to do is I'm going to take a couple questions here from the audience. We are happy to open up our panelists to answer your questions. I think we've got a couple of microphones. Allie has some microphones that she will bring over to you if you have a question. Who has a question? Bonnie has a question right here in the front.
Technology is a moving target, and now we have AI and VR. And we're talking 5G. How do we help parents to understand challenge that the superintendents and schools have, and why it is that we keep moving and changing the technology that we're using?
That's a great question, Bonnie. That's a fabulous question. So, as Bonnie said, there's so much new technology. It's moving all the time. Augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence. My sort of adaptation of Bonnie's question is, what are we doing in terms of communicating about technology to our parent community? How are we keeping them up to date on all of these changes? And maybe the other part of this, Bonnie, is how do we make sure that they are understanding what the benefits are? Not just, oh, great, we're bringing this new technology in, but what's the benefit of it? Paul?
One thing that we're seeing are that the parents are actually becoming more and more tech savvy. Again, we were surprised with last year's Speak Up survey that most of our parents prefer email as for communication. We weren't expecting that. They were also they prefer texting. That was like number 2 option for them. So the parents are more and more tech savvy. In terms of AR and things that are cutting edge, we haven't rolled them out widespread. We have a few teachers dabbling in that, but whenever we have a big initiative like one-to-one, there's always an education component where there's a parents' night. If we roll out, back in the early 2000s, we had rolled out something called Connected Math, which was a new way to do math, and the same type of thing where the parents would come in and we would have workshops or parent nights to explain. So if right now, at least where we're at, I think the parents are comfortable understanding the technology. Now we have some things like GPS and GIS, which we're using in a small number of classrooms, and we haven't had questions or saw the need because it's very consolidated. But we're ready to roll that out extensively. Then that could be another example of where we would need a parent night or some type of workshop.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
We also,
Go ahead,
ask our students to share what they're doing with their parents. I think that's very important. The parents I talk to sometimes are blown away with the technology that they're using, that their children are using. I know some of in our tech education programs, we might have parents that are in a drafting career, and our students are actually using the same digital formats as their parents are, and it's a real neat thing. And we really encourage our kids to show your parents what you're doing. That helps.
Go ahead, Margaret.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that I think it's the other way around. I think that we do have parents who are concerned about how much access kids have, and they want to know that we're protecting kids and teaching them how to be good digital citizens. But if anything, there's like an expectation that we're doing that as a school system. And sometimes, since we're publicly funded, sometimes that can be challenging to stay up to date as technology changes. But the main thing that we have to teach parents about is just the social media. Just trying to keep up with all the apps that kids are on could be pretty challenging too.
That's a major challenge. One of the things that we have found in our data, and it's a conflict in our data, some of you I know I've had sidebar conversations about. So 61% of parents told us last year that one of the big concerns they have about their child's use of technology is too much screen time. Equally high number of parents, though, say they like the personalization of the learning process enabled by technology. So we have too much screen time, but we like personalization. So how do we reconcile the two of those is another challenge front that we're dealing with in our schools and districts, making the messaging appropriate for parents to understand that. This question right here.
Hi, Helen Levy-Myers. Sort of to piggyback on that, I don't know if you know, but France recently passed a law outlawing personal cell phone devices in K-12 schools throughout the school day. And is there any pushback about, are you hearing anything about students having too much screen time or having access to it during the school day?
So maybe the way to ask this question is, what's the policies that we have represented here in terms of students' own devices being used in school?
One of the steps that we took as a school to prepare for that is we were really clear about setting up zones within the school in terms of when it was not allowed, when it, like, in locker rooms and like the hallway times that are more unsupervised and more unstructured, that there were yellow zones where kids could have, with teachers' permission, they could use it for a certain purpose. What we're finding, though, what I'm seeing so far with the 1 to 1 in 8th grade at least, is that there's not as much of a need for phones. So they're very clear that now that the parameters are set and it's not just a bunch of adults telling them to take their earbuds out, we're having to talk to kids less about taking their putting their phones up because they have that access and that engagement in the classroom. Knock on wood, we'll see how the rest of the year goes, but that's what we're seeing so far.
Jim?
We've changed our cell phone policy a few years back where it was at one point we didn't want to see them at all. Now we give access to kids during their lunches, between classes, that kind of stuff. Our incidences have dropped dramatically on that. Our teachers are allowing some cell phone use in the classroom, but they're using it as a tool. We have one-to-one, we have laptops, but sometimes that laptop takes a little bit to fire it up. But if it was just a question, hey, let's Google, who can Google, give a little incentive, who can get it first. So they're tools. I think if you take it out of the kid's hands, you're taking a tool out of the kid's hands. That's my belief anyway.
So let me ask my students, do any of you have a smartphone or a cell phone that you take to school? Okay, so it looks like our middle school and high school students do. Are you allowed to use that at school?
We can use in the school just when we have lunch in the middle of the class, if the teacher say yes, and then we can.
And then you can use it, okay. What about you, Paulina?
Pretty much, it's a no. If a teacher finds you with your phone out, they will take it, bring it to the office, and your parents have to come and pick it up. Unless the teacher gives you special permission, it's not even during lunch that you're allowed to take it out. You're supposed to keep it in your locker and it's off.
So, and this is just for the middle school and high school student. Do you think you should be able to use your smartphone or your cell phone at school?
No.
No? Paulina?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because sometimes it can be really helpful, and then sometimes students can abuse that privilege.
That's right.
And that's why they took it away in the first place.
Okay. One more question, folks. We have anybody else that has a question? Oh, Hillary has a question up here in the front, Allie.
Hi, I'm just curious with the new teachers coming in. I know in the past few years, a lot of the teachers had a lot more understanding of how to use technology, but then didn't quite know how to implement it for teaching and learning. So I'm curious if the new teachers coming in through their colleges of education are having better like you don't have to do the initial PD for using technology for teaching and learning.
In our case, again, we're small, so we don't have a large turnover, but teachers that we've been hiring over the recent years, they definitely are tech savvy. We just hired a middle school science teacher, and again, no problem whether it's using Moodle or our SIS system, but he also has plans of using our nature trail and introducing probes and all sorts of digital technology tools there. So I would, you can compare him to some of the more senior science teachers, and again, he does definitely have more expertise.
Yeah, the only thing we really have to do is give them a little PD on some of the resource that we use at school. The normal technology they excel at, and it's just showing them what we have and give them access to what we have and letting them go.
Yeah, if anything, the new teachers are teaching us. They're really the ones that are kind of taking the lead and showing some creative ways or different ways to do something, like how you might do it through traditional lessons. I think probably the challenge is teaching some, having PD around boundaries, because this is also a big, it's a generation that's very connected with social media. So having those boundaries with social media and students, because they may have a classroom page or a classroom Twitter or something, so having those boundaries, I think, is also just a piece to, as part of that development. But they're teaching us the new technologies and new ways to use them.
As far as the teachers that are coming in, I mean, they're coming out of college and they're really up on what's going on right now. But in our county, we have amazing, wonderful instructional technology coaches that are in each school, and they will come into your classroom with you and kind of roll out something different that you'd like to do. And they'll help you work with your students, but at the same time, they're teaching you how to use technology as well, and then putting a face to themselves as who they are in our building to get to know our students as well.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Hillary. All right, so folks, as we're closing up here, I want to thank you again for joining us. I've got what I'm calling a call to action. It's those thoughtful questions that I wanted to leave you with. They're also in the report. We've been doing more and more of this identification of questions because we know that schools and districts like to use our reports and now our briefing papers either within their professional learning communities or possibly as teacher professional development. And so these thought-provoking questions can be a way to stimulate new conversations in your schools and districts. So I gave you 5 here today. I'll just run through them quickly. The first one has to do with that conversation that we had about technology resource distribution equity. And so thinking about within your schools and districts, are we being equitable with those investments that we're making, with the distribution of those particular resources? The second one has to do with helping teachers understand the connection between the use of technology, the effective use of technology, and possibly the development of those workplace skills that we talked about. So that it's not just technology for technology's sake, but that it's actually purposeful, and thus the instructional practices support that. I'm still hearing a lot from teachers across the country when I ask them, and we ask them through the survey about the benefits of using technology. They say, oh, it's all about engagement. Well, we don't want to minimize engagement. Engagement is great. It's just that it's also about other things as well, and so being cognizant of that. Also, this idea of how, and Bonnie teed this up to us in many ways, how are we articulating out to our parent community about the use of technology, in particular thinking about that articulation and that messaging around equity and a priority for equity within our schools and districts. And then also, because it is near and dear to my heart, are we tapping into our students to ask about their ideas? They quite often, I have found, and students around the country are very acutely aware of the inequity, either in their educational experiences that they've had or with their peers in terms of the resources that their peers have. And so quite often we have the opportunity to talk with students about their ideas. So we'd like to encourage our schools and districts to listen more to their students about this. And then also we are increasingly talking with folks about a district focus on equity. Is that included in your vision and mission statement as a school or district? Are you putting your money where your mouth is, shall we say, in terms of making that an important priority? So interesting, thought-provoking questions. They could stimulate some really interesting conversations, we think, back in your schools or districts, as I said, within a professional learning community or as part of a professional development. Now, if you are interested in more resources from Project Tomorrow, please come visit us at tomorrow.org. As I said, we will be putting up this whole series of the 5 briefing papers. This briefing paper is already there for you. We also released earlier this summer, at the end of June, a new digital learning trends report that focused in on principals. A really interesting report looking at the emerging role of principals, not just as the instructional leader, but more as an instructional coach and a digital evangelist at the same time, putting just more work on the shoulders of our very hardworking principals. Anyway, we think it's a fabulous report where we did a special analysis of our data. I've had some districts that have said that they are using it as required reading for their principals as part of professional development. So something to keep in mind. There's lots of those type of fabulous resources on our website. We also, for those of you that are here with us today, we included a few of our infographics in your packet today, including the one on the homework gap, which is a very specific one having to do with the homework gap that we think is pretty impactful. And of course, If your school or district is interested in participating in Speak Up with us, many of the districts that are represented here today do on an annual basis. Our surveys are going to open up on October 15th. They'll be open until the end of January. This is 100% a free service where you have the opportunity to use surveys that we have created to collect feedback from your stakeholders and then also have the opportunity to receive all of your stakeholder data to use as comparatives. We work with a number of fabulous partners, many of which are represented here today, in terms of creating these surveys, and so we think that it's very beneficial service that we're providing to the schools and districts. And Paul gave a wonderful shout out to that at the start, so thank you very much. Folks, it's been great having you here today. Thank you so very much for joining us. Will you please join me in congratulating our panel here for all of their wisdom and insights. We'll stick around for a little bit, folks, here, if you have some additional questions. Otherwise, thank you so very much for joining us. Bye-bye.